She thought she had found the love of her life in the twilight of her years, but what began as a romance ended in captivity, humiliation, and betrayal beyond imagination. This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's a descent into something far darker. When trust is misplaced, when loneliness clouds judgment, and when wolves wear the skin of saviors, what's left of the soul? How does a life rooted in faith and hope become a stage for manipulation and horror? What happens when the very people we welcome into our homes turn out to be the ones who destroy them? Before we unravel this chilling and heartbreaking tale, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more shocking true stories of love, deception, and survival. At 63, Loretta Sharp was no stranger to life's storms. A retired city bus driver from Lansing, Michigan, she had spent decades behind the wheel, raising 3 children while navigating broken schedules, rough neighborhoods, and long, cold winters. She was widowed at 51 when her husband, David, passed suddenly from a heart attack. Since then, Loretta had poured everything she had into her children, watching them grow into their own. Micah, her son, worked as a barber in Flint. Latoya, her eldest, had a career in nursing, and her youngest, Simone, had recently moved out of state for a teaching job in Georgia. With the kids grown and gone, the once busy home now echoed with a silence that only deepened after retirement. The church filled some of that void. Her Pentecostal faith anchored her, and she was well known among the congregation for her tambourine, her hats, and her unwavering belief that the Lord would never leave her truly alone. But even God's promises felt distant on quiet Wednesday evenings and empty Sunday afternoons. Loretta never set out to find romance. She wasn't chasing anything foolish, and she wasn't desperate, at least, not in the way her children feared. She joined a Facebook group for spiritual soulmates over 50 just to talk, share scriptures, testimonies, maybe connect with others who also felt a little forgotten. But one night, she got a message. A young man calling himself Zaire DeReal had commented under her post about grace. "You got a beautiful spirit, Queen," he wrote. She smiled. That's all it was at first, a flattering comment, something harmless. But he followed it up with a private message. And then another. Zaire was 24, from Shreveport, Louisiana. Tall, smooth-talking, and charismatic. His profile was full of selfies, muscle shirts, and quotes about loyalty, respect, and divine timing. Loretta had never met anyone like him. He called her queen, said her eyes were soft like peace, and told her he looked forward to hearing her voice before bed every night. It started to feel like something out of a dream. Absurd, maybe, but flattering. He told her he didn't care about the age difference. "Your soul's young," he said. "I don't care what nobody thinks. You deserve love, not loneliness." It felt like someone finally saw her again, not just as someone's mother or someone's usher board president, but as a woman with desires, with feelings. And though she hesitated at first, feeling silly, unsure, she slowly let herself believe in the possibility of something new. But not everyone shared her optimism. Micah, her only son, was blunt from the start. "Ma, you don't know this man. It ain't right," he said, shaking his head when she showed him a photo Zaire had sent. Latoya, always more measured but no less concerned, said, "Mama, please. He's half your age. He wants something." Nobody that age is on Facebook talking to a 63-year-old for nothing. Still, Loretta stood firm. "He's different," she said, her voice trembling with both conviction and the fear of being laughed at. "God sent him to me. You might not see it now, but I know what I feel, and I won't apologize for feeling loved." To her children, it sounded like delusion, but to Loretta, it felt like deliverance. After years of silence and solitude, Zaire's voice felt like sunlight on her skin. She had no idea that behind the smooth words and gentle praise, darkness was waiting. October 17th, 2021. The day Loretta Sharp decided to gamble everything for love. She boarded the Greyhound bus with trembling hands and a heart so full it threatened to burst. Tucked safely inside her purse was a prepaid Visa card loaded with $4,000 from her savings. Money, she told herself, was for a fresh start, a shared beginning. She wore her favorite wig, a deep mahogany bob that framed her face just right. Her lips were painted in a bold new shade she'd picked up on a whim at Walgreens. And her Sunday best, a deep purple dress with a gold brooch, clung to her like armor. She wasn't foolish. She was faithful, hopeful, nervous, but ready. Before she left, she slipped a note under her pastor's office door. "Pray for me. I might be coming back with a testimony." That was Loretta, still rooted in belief, still trusting that the Lord worked in mysterious ways. When she stepped off the bus in Shreveport, the humid air wrapped around her like a blanket. And there he was, Zaire, just as he had described himself. Tall, bronze-skinned, dreadlocked, his arms covered in ink that told stories she hadn't yet heard. He walked up slowly, confidently, like he owned the pavement. Then, without a word, he wrapped her in a hug that felt too big for someone she'd never met. She melted into it. All the doubts, all the warnings, the sleepless nights, they faded. In that moment, she believed she was exactly where she was meant to be. The first 2 days were a dream. They checked into a modest roadside motel with scratchy sheets and broken AC, but Loretta didn't care. They went to greasy diners where Zaire fed her fries dipped in his milkshake. He called her baby now, not just queen. They held hands walking through Walmart. He kissed her forehead and whispered about getting a place together, something near the river, maybe, where she could plant tomatoes and he could record his music. She felt young again, alive again. Chosen, but dreams cracked quietly at first. By the second night, she noticed his phone. It never stopped buzzing. Long text threads, multiple calls. Each time it rang, he stepped outside, away from her. When she asked about it, he smiled. "Just my brothers. I don't want them in our business yet. They get jealous. Nosy." She nodded, told herself it made sense. They were building something private, sacred. Some things didn't need explaining, not yet. But deep in her chest, something small twisted. A whisper, easily ignored. The kind of whisper that would grow louder with time. By day 3, the sweetness began to sour. Loretta had noticed Zaire growing quieter, distracted, as if something unseen was pulling him away from her. Still, when he took her hand that morning and said, "Come on, I want to show you where we can chill for a while," she followed without question. Love, true love, she believed, required trust, even when it led down unfamiliar roads. They took a rideshare to a part of town that looked nothing like the cozy Shreveport neighborhoods she had seen in brochures. The streets were cracked and uneven. Streetlights were either shattered or missing entirely. Stray dogs roamed the curbs like shadows. The house itself sagged like it was tired of standing. Paint peeled from the walls, windows were boarded on one side, and the porch leaned sideways like a crooked smile. "It's my cousin's crib," Zaire said casually, already unlocking the door. "We can chill here for a few days until our spot's ready." The inside smelled like sweat, mold, and stale smoke. There were no pictures on the walls, no comfort in the furniture. Just darkness and noise. 3 other young men were sprawled across mismatched couches and stained mattresses. Tavian was stocky with dead, suspicious eyes. Rommel sat quietly, watching Loretta too closely. And JMR, whom they called Meat, paced the room with jittery energy, sniffing and mumbling to himself, his pupils too wide, his smile too thin. They didn't greet her like family. They didn't even greet her like a guest. They grinned and snickered, called her names that weren't meant to be sweet Granny Queen, sugar pudding, old gold. Loretta tried to laugh it off, play the good sport. But her spine tingled with something colder than fear, something like knowing. That night, Zaire brought her a glass of cheap wine in a plastic cup. He sat beside her on the creaky couch, lifted the cup, and said, "To forever." Then he kissed her forehead, softly, like before, and watched her drink. It hit fast. Too fast. The first wave was heat, then a rush of dizziness that pushed her head back. Her tongue thickened. Her legs went limp. The world around her blurred like smeared paint. She tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but the words drowned in her throat. Zaire leaned close, his breath suddenly unfamiliar, his voice no longer tender. "Smile for the fans, baby," he whispered. And then nothing. Loretta awoke on a stained mattress, her head throbbing, her Sunday dress torn and dirted beyond recognition. Harsh lights beamed into her face, camera lights. She couldn't move. Her hands were bound, her legs strapped down. The room smelled of mold, sweat, and something metallic she couldn't place. Panic bloomed in her chest. For 3 harrowing days, Loretta was held captive in that filthy room while strangers on the other side of a hidden network watched. Zaire, Tavian, Rommel, and Meat weren't just playing lovers and brothers anymore. They had become her jailers. They orchestrated everything with cold precision, treating her like an object, a prop in a twisted performance streamed live to voyeurs who paid to watch suffering. They stripped her of everything, her dignity, her privacy, her voice. They forced her to smile, to say things that broke her spirit. Whenever she tried to resist, they tightened the restraints or shut off the lights, leaving her in silence and darkness for hours on end. "You deserve love too," her voice said in one message, even as tears streamed down her face behind the scenes. Zaire whispered filth in her ears. Tavian hit her with a belt when she screamed. Rommel spat on her. Meat took photos between his sobs of laughter. They starved her, fed her amphetamines, made her pose. And when she passed out, they splashed water on her and started again. The men laughed at her desperation. They gave her nicknames like Old Gold and Granny Stream, reducing her to a spectacle. Meat urinated on her as others cheered. Tavian took a knife one night and carved the word obedient into her arm, not deep, but enough to bleed, to mark. She screamed, and they turned the volume up on the stream. They called it entertainment. Loretta called it hell. And yet, somewhere deep inside, beneath the trauma and fear, a flicker of survival remained. A hope that someone, somewhere, was watching for the right reason and would find her before it was too late. Sure, Thomasine Boudreau had lived on that street in Shreveport for nearly 40 years. A retired nurse in her 70s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, she had seen enough to know when something didn't sit right. For weeks, she'd noticed the strange activity across the street, a revolving door of young men, loud trap music that pulsed into the early morning hours, and strange shadows moving behind blackout curtains. But it wasn't just the noise or the chaos that made her stomach twist. It was the feeling that someone, inside that house was suffering. On the night of October 23rd, Thomasine stood by her living room window around midnight, sipping lukewarm chamomile tea when she heard it. Soft crying. It wasn't the wailing of a party gone wrong or someone arguing over a dice game. It was different. It was fragile. It was a cry that pierced bone. A woman's cry. One that sounded like a prayer and a farewell all at once. That was enough for her. She picked up the phone and called Shreveport PD. "Y'all need to come check that house across the street. Something's wrong in there." "Real wrong," she said. And she meant it. She waited on her porch with her sweater wrapped tight, watching like a sentinel while the patrol cars pulled up in silence. The officers didn't come with sirens. They rolled up slow, 2 unmarked cars first, followed by a cruiser and a K-9 unit. Guns were drawn as they crept toward the dilapidated house with cracked windows and garbage piled by the back fence. When they knocked and got no answer, one officer peered through the cracked blinds and saw a flicker of movement, then bolted for the door. With a single kick, the door gave way and chaos erupted inside. The stench hit them first: rot, sweat, and something acrid. Inside was squalor. Stained walls, drug paraphernalia, a mattress on the living room floor, laptops, cameras, and wires everywhere. Loretta was not in plain sight. Zaire and Tavian made a run for it, crashing through the kitchen and toward the back exit. But the K-9 unit was waiting. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, the dog snarling, officers shouting commands. Rommel was caught trying to smash a hard drive with a frying pan in the kitchen sink. Officers tackled him to the floor before he could reach the back door. In a dark corner of the living room, Meat Withers lay slumped in a filthy recliner, a tourniquet still around his arm, his pupils tiny and glazed over. He barely stirred as the officers moved in. Then, one officer heard a faint gurgle behind the closed bathroom door. They broke it down. Loretta was inside, naked except for a shredded bedsheet, chained by her ankle to a pipe under the sink. She was unconscious, blood crusted on her forehead, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her wig was gone. Her lips were cracked. Her arms were littered with bruises and burns. The officer radioed in immediately. "We've got a live victim. Female. Breathing, but barely. We need medics now." Within minutes, EMS arrived. Loretta was rushed to Oxnard LSU Health in critical condition. It would take hours of care just to stabilize her. The ER staff couldn't believe what they were seeing: a woman old enough to be their grandmother, brutalized, starved, left for dead. Back at the house, detectives began cataloging the evidence. Dozens of digital devices, hidden cameras, fake IDs, scripts, even a whiteboard with usernames and target lists that included names, ages, and online profiles of other women. They found Loretta's phone in a shoebox under a couch cushion, logged into her Facebook account, messages sent out as recently as that morning. Her voice was there, but not her words. The Shreveport Police Department wouldn't sleep for the next 72 hours. What they uncovered was bigger than any one woman. It was an organized, predatory web of manipulation, catfishing, trafficking, and live stream exploitation, all masked behind a young man's charm and the lie of love. And it was only just beginning to unravel. The trial began in January under a blanket of cold, gray skies and tighter than usual courthouse security. Zaire Markel Drayton entered the courtroom in shackles, no longer the smooth-talking charmer Loretta had once prayed with, but a hollow-eyed man whose name had become synonymous with evil. Alongside him stood Tavian Rush, Rommel Boyd, and Jammer Meat Withers, all silent, all stone-faced. Their attorneys offered little beyond procedural defenses. There was no room for doubt, not with what had been recovered. The prosecution laid out the case with horrifying clarity. A digital trail of deceit, footage no jury should ever have to see, and volumes of chat logs filled with religious manipulation, promises of companionship, and sinister scripts. They didn't just exploit Loretta. They had hunted grandmothers. The evidence, over 400 gigabytes of footage and chat logs, revealed 18 additional elderly victims, some still unaccounted for. Some who had died from natural causes now had their deaths under reinvestigation. When Loretta appeared on screen via live hospital testimony, the courtroom held its collective breath. She was gaunt and pale, eyes sunken, arms shaking as nurses helped prop her upright in the hospital bed. She wore a soft blue gown. Her voice trembled, but it carried. She spoke not just for herself, but for all the women whose voices had been stolen. She told them about the messages, the way Zaire made her feel seen, young again, forgiven. She described the drive to the house, the darkness, the unease, and how he poured the wine. She broke down recounting the moment she realized she'd been drugged. At one point, during the playback of the video evidence, she screamed and fainted. Court was recessed for over an hour as nurses stabilized her. When she returned, quieter, glassy-eyed, she was asked if she recognized her abuser. She nodded toward Zaire and whispered through cracked lips, "I trusted you." Her children sat in the gallery, unable to hold back tears. Micah, her eldest son, punched a hallway wall during recess so hard his knuckles bled. Her daughter Yvette refused to watch the footage. She spent most of the trial with her eyes closed, praying under her breath. After testimony ended, they embraced Loretta at the hospital, the three of them crumbling together like glass under a hammer. Their mother had always been the strong one, the matriarch, the Sunday caller, the gumbo maker. And now she had been broken in ways they never imagined. Pastor Delroy Henderson from Zion Hill Baptist Church sat behind them every day of the trial, Bible in hand, face unreadable. After court adjourned each day, he held quiet prayers with the family outside the building. This was evil in its rawest form, he told reporters. We failed our elders. As a community, as a nation, as people of faith. The public reaction was swift and fierce. The media dubbed it the House of Horrors case, and soon every network from CNN to local affiliates was digging into Zaire's online persona, the apps he used, the Facebook posts he crafted, the chilling way he mimicked God's voice to prey on the lonely. Social workers demanded reform, cyber surveillance tools for the elderly, stronger education on romance scams, mandatory check-ins for isolated seniors. Churches held candlelight vigils in cities across Louisiana. Loretta's own church held one every night until sentencing. Her pew sat empty, draped in purple cloth, a single rose on the seat. When the verdict came, it was unanimous on all counts. Zaire was sentenced to 6 life terms without parole. Tavian, Rommel, and Meade each received 92 years, no chance of release. Judge Elkins, her voice shaking, said, "There are no words that can match the horror you inflicted, but the law will answer where the soul aches." Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered in prayer and protest, chanting Loretta's name as a symbol of resilience, a warning, and a call to protect the vulnerable. Micah addressed the press once, saying, "My mom didn't just survive. She exposed a monster network. She's not just a victim. She's the reason these demons are in cages." And still, back in her hospital room, Loretta didn't smile. She stared out the window in silence, her eyes tracing the movement of clouds. The court had delivered justice. But healing, real healing, was still a mountain she hadn't yet begun to climb. This was more than a crime. It was a calculated assault on dignity, trust, and hope. Loretta's search for companionship, for a sliver of light in her golden years, was weaponized against her with chilling precision. The men who did this weren't just predators. They were architects of suffering, exploiting faith, loneliness. Of every whispered prayer and every lonely night Loretta had ever endured. And yet, from that darkness came a break in the chain. Her survival lit the path to justice, pulling back the curtain on a network of evil that could have claimed countless more lives. As the courtroom doors closed behind those who harmed her, the question now turns to us. How do we protect the most vulnerable among us from digital predators? How do we talk to our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors about the lies wrapped in flattery and scripture? How do we make sure that no one else believes a stranger's "I love you" should come at the cost of their safety, their body, or their soul? Loretta may never fully recover from what she endured, but her courage sparked change. Her voice, shaky, broken, yet unwavering, exposed monsters and shut down a pipeline of cruelty. In the end, she gave the world a warning wrapped in testimony. A wound turned into a reckoning. If Loretta's story moved you, like this video and subscribe for more true crime investigations that expose the darkest truths behind smiles, screens, and sweet-talking strangers. Because justice doesn't begin in a courtroom, it begins with awareness. And sometimes, survival itself is the greatest act of resistance.